I'm 85 years old, and I need you to listen to the sound of a friendship dying. This morning, the headlines across America and Canada are screaming about 100% tariffs, China's influence, and the cold, measured response from Mark Carney. They are calling it a trade war, a necessary defense, or a strategic pivot. But as I look at the map of North America, the same map that hung in my father's workshop 80 years ago, I don't see a strategy, I see a weapon. And if you're about to scroll past this because you think trade policy doesn't touch your soul, then you are already standing on the wrong side of the door. I've seen this before. I know exactly how this story ends. It starts with a handshake, and it ends with a word that will eventually break your heart. That word is loyalty. For 85 years, I've watched the system use that word like a sedative. They tell you to be loyal to the border, loyal to the flag, and loyal to the national interest, even when it contradicts your own survival. In January 2026, they are asking you to be loyal to a 100% tax on your neighbor, the same neighbor that has shared your table, your history, and your defense for a century. They say it's about China. They say it's about security. But a 100% tariff isn't a shield, it's a chokehold. It is the moment the system stops caring about the person and starts obsessing over the perimeter. I stood at a border fence once, back when I was young and full of certainties, and I cheered for a wall. I thought I was being a patriot. I didn't realize that every brick I laid was another stone in my own prison. Closely at the screen this morning, when the headlines talk about hitting Canada to stop China, they are playing a game of three-card Monty with your future. They want you to focus on the threat across the ocean so you don't notice the cost of the bread on your own table. A 100% tariff is an admission of failure. It is the sound of a system that can no longer compete, so it chooses to cannibalize its closest friend. I remember the air in the 1970s, the sudden shifts in policy, the feeling that the rules were being rewritten overnight. We were told to be patient, we were told to be loyal. When the system asks for your loyalty during a crisis, it's usually because it has already spent your liberty. If you skip this video now, you are choosing to believe the temporary lie again. You are choosing to believe that these walls are being built for you. But history has a memory longer than a news cycle. I've lived through the cycles where protection became poverty and loyalty became liquidation. I saw my own community cheer for an isolation they thought would save them, only to wake up a decade later, wondering why their world had become so small and so silent. This isn't just about Canada. It's about the moment you realize that your loyalty is being used as a down payment for a war you didn't ask for. I have spent my life watching the same pattern repeat, and I am telling you now, the wall they are building today is intended to keep you in just as much as it keeps the enemy out. Are you still waiting for the experts to tell you it's going to be okay? Or are you ready to see the pattern before the 100% price tag becomes the permanent cost of your silence? The ghost of 1930 doesn't live in the dusty pages of a history book. It lives in the hollow sound of an empty shipyard. I remember my grandfather talking about the Great Protection. That's what they called it at first. Back when the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act was signed into law. He was a man of the docks, a man whose entire life was measured by the rhythm of crates moving from the sea to the shore. When the news came that Washington was raising a wall against 20,000 different items to save the American worker, the docks erupted in cheers. They felt a surge of loyalty to a system that finally seemed to be fighting for them. They thought they were building a fortress. They didn't realize they were building a tomb. By the time the winter of 1930 settled in, the cheering had stopped. I remember my grandfather describing the smell of that year, the scent of rotting oranges and spoiled grain sitting in hulls of ships that no one would unload. Because when you slap a 100% tax on your neighbor doesn't just say thank you. They strike back. The world didn't just stop trading, it stopped breathing. The very loyalty my grandfather felt toward those tariffs was the thing that eventually took the boots off his feet. He watched the cranes go still. He watched the iron start to rust. The protection he had cheered for had turned the harbor into a graveyard of ambition. Look at the headlines today about the 100% tariffs on Canada. They tell you it's a bazooka aimed at China. They tell you it's a necessary sacrifice to keep the North American market pure. But I've seen this movie before, and I know the ending. In 1930, they told my grandfather that if he was loyal to the tariff, the factory would stay open. But the tariff didn't just keep foreign goods out, it kept the world's wealth from flowing in. Within months, world trade collapsed by 66%. The walls didn't protect the worker, they isolated him until he starved in the dark. A border is a line on a map. A tariff is a line across your throat. We are making the same mistake in January 2026. We are being asked to use our loyalty as a weapon against a nation that shares our language, our electricity, and our very blood. When you demand 100% from your friend, you aren't negotiating, you are liquidating a century of trust. And just like in 1930, the elites who sign these decrees won't be the ones standing on the docks watching the fruit rot. They won't be the ones wondering why the price of a car or a loaf of bread just doubled overnight. I remember my grandfather sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his calloused hands, wondering where the Great Protection had gone. He realized too late that the system's loyalty only extends as far as its next election cycle. He'd bet his life on a wall, only to find out that a wall is the only thing that doesn't care who it crushes when it falls. Are you going to wait until the docks go silent in 2026 to realize that the security they are selling you is just a high-priced ticket to a repeat of the Great Depression? I'm 85 years old, and I still have a key in my pocket to a building that hasn't existed for 40 years. It was a precision valve shop, 40 miles south of the Canadian line. In the summer of 1985, the air in that shop smelled like ozone and heavy machine oil, the scent of a life that made sense. We didn't see a border back then, we saw a bridge. Every Tuesday, a truck from Ontario would roll up to our bay, and the driver, a man named Jacques, would bring us a box of maple candies and a list of parts that kept 3 factories in Montreal running. We were more than neighbours, we were the gears in the same machine. Then, the dispute arrived. The news anchors began talking about unfair subsidies and national defence. They used the word loyalty like a hammer. They told us that by allowing Jacques' truck to cross so easily, we were weakening the American spirit. I remember sitting at my desk, looking at the first set of tariffs they slapped on our exports. It wasn't 100% back then, but it was enough. I told my men to stay calm. I told them to be loyal to the new policy. I said the government knows what it's doing. We're protecting our own. Wait. Take a breath. Look at the dust motes in the air of that memory. I sat in that shop for 3 hours after the final administrative order came down. I remember the sound of the overhead heater humming in the silence. No trucks, no laughter from Jacques, just the sound of a dream cooling down. I had chosen to be loyal to a policy drafted in an office 300 miles away, and in exchange the system had cut the throat of my business. By being a good citizen, I had become an accomplice in my own bankruptcy. When I look at the 2026 headlines about Trump's 100% tariffs on Canada, I don't see an economic masterstroke. I see the same cold, blind blade that cut my life in half in 1985. You think you're being strong by supporting these walls. You feel a rush of pride when you hear the word loyalty. But a wall doesn't have eyes. It doesn't know the difference between an enemy and the man who kept your shop running for 20 years. My regret isn't that the market changed. It's that I believed the lie that my safety was tied to a barrier. I chose a border over a brother, and I spent the next decade realizing that the border didn't care if I could pay my mortgage. I watch you today nodding your heads at the news of the 100% strike, and I want to reach through the screen and shake you. If you think a 100% tariff is going to make your life more secure, you are betting your future on the same ghost I chased into the ground. Are you going to wait for the silence in your own shop to realize that loyalty to a system is the fastest way to lose the things that actually matter? The circle is closing. The 100% tariff on Canada in January 2026 isn't a bold new direction. It is the final, desperate breath of a system that has run out of honest ways to survive. They tell you it's about China. They tell you it's about securing the perimeter, but they're really telling you that the world they promised you, the world of open bridges and shared prosperity, is officially being liquidated. They are cashing in your loyalty to save a ledger that was balanced with lies long ago. I'm 85 years old, and I've learned that the only line on a map that matters is the one you draw around your own home. If you spend your life staring at the border, waiting for the government to protect you from your neighbour, you will miss the moment the system reaches into your own pocket. True sovereignty isn't found in a trade deal or a 100% tax on a friend. It is found in the refusal to let your survival be a variable in someone else's geopolitical gamble. Let the noise of the news cycle fade. Look at the horizon. I'm not telling you to be a rebel. I'm telling you to be a survivor. The men I knew in 1930 and 1985 who made it through weren't the ones who shouted the loudest about loyalty to the policy of the day. They were the ones who looked at the crumbling bridges and decided to build their own. They diversified their lives, their skills, and their connections so that no single administrative order could erase their existence. They realized that when the macro world turns into a theater of the absurd, your only truth is the micro world you build with your own two hands. As the 2026 trade war intensifies and the price of your reality begins to climb, I want you to stop looking at the flags. Start looking at your autonomy. If your ability to feed your family depends on a 100% strike against a neighbor, then you aren't a citizen. You're a hostage. My regret is that I spent 40 years thinking the border was my shield. I didn't realize until it was too late that the only real loyalty that counts is the one you have to your own resilience and the people who actually know your name. Don't be the ink they use to write their next grand illusion. Be the hand that writes its own story. The system will continue to move the lines and raise the walls, promising you that the next one will finally make you safe. But I am an old man standing at the end of the road, and I can tell you that the only thing a wall ever produced was a shadow. Are you going to stay in that shadow, waiting for permission to thrive? Or are you ready to look past the border and reclaim the horizon that was always yours?